Welcome tonight. Welcome tonight, all the attendees, all of our virtual participants. Stuff behind here. There we go. Sorry. Oh, I'm not going to leave bag. We're good. All right. Our virtual participants and everyone watching on YouTube. Our sponsors, thank you guys very much for everything, for your memberships, and that's what helps keep everything going with us here at the History Diving Museum. All of our longtime members, thank you again. Also, we have a really cool thing coming up called the Aquanauts, the Astronauts. They've got a lot of really neat things coming down the pipeline that I've heard from NASA and everything else. But that's opening May 20th here. So that's going to be really, really neat. I'm personally really excited about being here for that, seeing that with Bird and everybody, and Jan Koblick. He's got a lot of connections with NASA and all that. So, so yeah, it's pretty interesting. It's going to be pretty out of this world, I guess. So no pun intended. Exactly. And then so that'll be here, and then Earth Day with NASA at the Blue Flux Marathon Airport on April 22nd. They're going to have History Diving Museum and NASA will have a fun day with climate change research, mangrove planting, and aircraft tours. So I'm retired Air Force, so I love diving. So I think I should have been diving, but I still love aircraft. So it should be pretty cool seeing those down there. So yeah, hopefully if you want to volunteer, help out, talk to the ladies, gentlemen here at the museum. We'll be more than happy to help you out with that. I know I'm going to try to help out as much as I can now that this is a board member to learn more people's names and participate more. So, and then next month's program and Immerse Yourself is going to be Aquanauts Astronauts. So that's the one. I can't wait. So that's going to be the rollout of the whole Aquanauts Astronauts. So I get to go down and spend 24 hours with Joe Daturi doing the 100-day mission up at Jules. He's doing 100 days underwater, and some of the studies that he's doing down there actually is for NASA. So station tubes, blood draws, bone density, all that. So I'm going to get a little bit more intel from him on that on Monday. So that's going to be pretty interesting. Yes.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but what date is that next month?
It's going to be May 17th.
Thank you.
Yep. And so you can, all this information is going to be also on the website as well. One fun thing I get to do in December of this year is my talk on the WASP project, the Women Air Force Service project, the last missing WASP. So that'll be December 20th.
December 20th.
Yep. So that's when I'm doing that talk. So I'm going to I'll get to talk about a P-51 missing. So anyway, without further ado, we have Paul Evans. He is a science writer, outreach coordinator with the University of Florida's Crocodiles, the Croc Docs research team. That's awesome, by the way. Are a team of biologists who are working to improve an understanding of reptile populations in South Florida and the Caribbean, as well as endangered mammals in Central America. So without further ado, welcome.
Well, thank you guys so much for having me. We are going to be talking about crocodiles. Could you guys just raise your hand if you've seen a crocodile? Are you sure it's a crocodile, not a gator? Yes, very good. You guys down in the Keys tend to actually know what things are, which coming from Fort Lauderdale is such a blessing to see still exists, and Americans that we can learn and know what stuff is. So we're going to be talking about seeing America's crocodile. We only have one crocodile up here. It is, of course, Crocodilus acutus. So this is me. This is what I look like when I'm not talking to people, typically between the hours of 5 p.m. and 5 a.m. That is when we work a lot with crocodiles, alligators, and other large invasive species. I'm sure some of you have heard of Burmese python, tegu, and we also have the invasive spectacled caiman, which is a smaller type of cousin of the alligator. So all of those is what we at the Croc Docs have been studying. I work heavily in wildlife research and morphometrics, so how the body and life history of certain species function, as well as doing outreach and science writing. So that stuff is this, talking to people, spreading this information. When we do these really cool research projects, I try to break it down into terms everyone can understand, because sometimes we talk about things, we use really big words and it's a little hard to understand. And us as an organization with the University of Florida, Croc Docs, we've been doing this research for 50 years. So my boss, Dr. Frank Mazzotti, he was the first Croc Doc, if you will. And he started in the 1970s, when really the shift for trying to protect some of these larger predators first started. Here in America, he was one of the first people on that kind of wavelength. So our little overview today, we're going to be going over some background information into crocodiles, not just here in Florida, but kind of as a species and into a little bit of their genetics. We're going to go into the research focus of what we care about, why we're kind of very interested at them within the Florida Keys in this part of the world. And then some things maybe you should know if you didn't know for living so close proximity to these animals compared to a lot of us here. So here are our crocodilians. Scientifically, we throw a Y in there just for fun, but if you were to have an I where that Y is, you are still grammatically correct. Something to do with Latin, not entirely sure. But if you see where we have that little green box, that is Crocodile cutis. So that is our crocodile here in Florida. All those ones right around it, so all the ones, all those ones right around it are what we call New World crocodiles. So that's the Cuban crocodile, which lives in Cuba. The Morelet crocodile, it lives throughout Belize, Guatemala, and parts of Central America. And then we have the Orinoco crocodile, which is going to be the third largest crocodile in the world. And it lives primarily in Venezuela, Colombia. All four of those being the New World, they actually came from the Nile crocodile. So genetically, about somewhere between 10 to 15 years ago, they made the swim across part of the Atlantic into the Americas.
The day before, told King Gillis was shot in upstate New York. They say homeowner.
So what is on our right? You're right.
Which right?
We'll do which way you're saying. So this side.
This side.
Crocodile.
Crocodile.
Okay. Other side. Very good. So we can kind of tell some of these differences are going to be a little bit of a leaner jaw, but that's really only for some types of crocodiles. If you were to look at a mugger crocodile, this is a type of crocodile that it lives in India. It's also a pretty large animal, getting up into the 18 to 20 foot. It has a much wider jaw. And a lot of that has to do with the environment. So animals that live or marine environments, they don't necessarily eat things like deer. There's not a lot of deer hanging out in beaches. So a gator, it needs more of a wide kind of compact jaw. It's going to possibly be eating deer. It's going to be eating all certain types, now pythons, birds, fish, whatever. They're going to have more of a generalistic approach. Whereas something like crocodile, especially the American crocodile, it's a very marine species. So fish, sharks, turtles, octopus, all those things are more a part of its diet. So it needs a little bit leaner, longer jaw, as well as that's going to help with streamlined movement when it goes through. So here is our American crocodile. It is a flagship federally threatened species. So it's one of the animals that we really pride ourselves on trying to understand more, not just here, but crocodiles across the world, because a lot of them fall into this fairly important category. Same with wolves, same with a lot of these other large apex predators, that when we start to have major problems with an ecosystem, we start to see it first in them before it actually starts to shift and impact the rest of the ecosystem. So here is the range. They live all across upper half of South America, all throughout Central and throughout the entire Caribbean. So some of our crocodiles here in the Florida Keys actually will go to different parts of the upper Caribbean, just swimming through those channels and those marine waters. They are the second most widespread crocodile species, and a lot of that has to do with them being so marine. Anyone want to take a guess of what they think the first most widespread crocodile species is? It is going to be the saltwater. So big salties down in Australia, they're able to do the same thing, except for in Oceania. So because of their ability to tolerate saltwater conditions, they're able to spread through a much wider environment, being parts of the lower Pacific. Where here, a lot of them are kind of just stuck throughout a lot of the Caribbean and the Gulf.
So you're saying ours are not saltwater?
Not by name. So they are in saltwater, but
Yeah.
saltwater is just the species that lives in parts of Northern Australia, Oceania. It's the big giant ones that Steve Irwin primarily.
Oh, okay.
Ours are just American crocodiles. They live throughout the Americas. As you see, we're in its most northern range. So for species in their most northern and southern range, that's where its quality of life is a little less. So we're going to get them a little bit smaller. They're pushed a little bit more to their brink for what they would need on a normal day. And then here in the Keys and here in Florida, we've upped that ante a little bit more. So they're the second most marine species of crocodilian, as well as they're going to be the second largest. They can get up to almost 20 feet in males. Primarily, that's not going to happen a lot here in Florida because we are in that upper limit. So we probably, the largest ones we tend to see are maybe about 4 meters. But if you were to go to Costa Rica or somewhere in Central America, you definitely could find more of those larger 20-foot individuals. Those individuals can get close to, if not over 1,000 pounds. These are very, very large animals. When I did my tour here before talking to you guys today, the 75-pound thing was a very easy lift for me because we have to lift all these animals to weigh them. So we are, when I'm not here, we're lifting, 200, 300-pound animals trying to do this. Obviously, not just me. We've got to use quite a few people for those ones. But a lot of the animals we don't think of as being heavy because we see them in water. And a lot of that means they are going to store a lot of that weight in different places. A lot of that's going to be right here behind the jaw. So they have all those strong muscles. American crocodiles don't have the strongest bite, but some crocodilians can get into 1,600,000 pressure. So that is going to be the strongest bite pressure that we have today. And that will be found in saltwater and Nile crocodiles. And then a lot of that other weight is in their tail. So if you've seen the tail of a crocodile, it's a nice paddle. It's a lot more thick at the end than it would be for an alligator. Because an alligator, they don't really like deep water. They don't like too much height. They want to be in a swamp. They don't want to have to fight a whole lot of water moving upstream. American crocodiles, they want that. They want to move through and cut through that water, which is why they're going to have a lot more muscle and built up in certain parts of their tails. Now, something that's kind of funny with American crocodiles is they're actually one of the species of crocodiles that are more calm, a little less aggressive initially. And this has been noted simply because they coexist with a lot more species of crocodilian than any other crocodile. So they live here and interact with American alligators. They interact with more alert crocodiles throughout parts of their range, as well as with Orinoco's and quite a few different types of caiman in parts of Central and South America. So a lot of the times they're just going to be finding a different food source and they don't care as much. They definitely can and have eaten crocodiles. These are one of the species that do perform cannibalism sometimes. Sometimes it's fighting over a mate and not necessarily for food. Sometimes it's protecting their babies. It's a baby crocodiles are maybe that big. It's a pretty easy meal if you're a growing juvenile in a struggling environment. So mama crocodiles, mama alligators, they are one of the better parents, especially from the reptile world. But besides that, they will eat fish, amphibians, birds, some mammals. Actually, recently, it was documented for the first time in Florida, them eating a dead manatee. So it's kind of interesting. It should be noted, it didn't kill the manatee, but still found it and was like, this is a great food source, lots of fat on that animal. So definitely is a good food item. Now, that star is where we do research on American crocodiles, but we also do research of them in Belize, in Guatemala, and Jamaica. So we have done research with these species all over because there's a lot of other governments, local research teams that are kind of, we'll say in year 10, while we're in year 50 of this process. So there's a lot of information that we're able to share with them and trying to get kind of the ball rolling a little faster. So healthier populations in other parts of the range are able to develop and not be as hindered. So here we are in Florida. These are primarily where we do a lot of our research. So Everglades National Park, Crocodile Lake National Wildlife Refuge, Biscayne National Park, and Turkey Point. Does everyone know what Turkey Point is? Yep, no? Okay, it is a nuclear power plant that FPL uses for electricity. Don't ask me questions about electricity, not my specialty. But when we get into those canals that they have to use to cool off the nuclear power plant system, it ended up creating a perfect habitat for American crocodiles. So there's some of the largest numbers that we get. We're talking like thousands of babies each summer. They have all these nice dunes that make the canals, and those are some of the perfect substrate for these animals, as well as having a little bit warmer water. They don't stay too close to the actual immediate cooling process because there it's almost boiling. But so you move out from those canals towards those edge right before Biscayne Bay. There's a whole lot of them, and it's just because it's a very good habitat as well as not a whole lot of human interference. There's a lot of legal reasons why people can't go there. So it's a much safer habitat for them. So when people first found crocodiles here, they found them in Archer Creek, which is kind of near Biscayne Bay, in 1870. I think it was technically 71, but hearsay. And they actually thought it was a new species because it was the first time they'd actually seen crocodiles here in Florida. They had found gators, and many times some of them had been brought in, and whether they were crocodiles or not, they weren't able to document that until the 1870s, and they actually thought it was going to be its own species. Obviously, we now know it isn't, but it was for a couple of years, Crocodilus florinandus, which was cool, but then it got not so cool when hunting pressures started to happen, because obviously a lot of really good skin. There's nice leather, there's nice high quality hide you can get from these types of animals because they can survive a lot. They're very resilient. So that outside armor that they have became a very wanted commodity. So around 1910, as Florida got more developed, this is when it really ticked up in people going after crocodiles and specifically for skin. And that happened until 1970, when finally a lot more protections went in place. This caused the population to collapse. This is when it got really, really bad because they used to live as far north in Florida as Tampa Bay. So they used to be way up there, and now about as far north as I think Marco Island. Anyone know where Marco Island is? That's the furthest north we've really seen an actual population. Doesn't mean they won't be able to get back to that point one day, but it is interesting because primarily the main reason why they don't have the whole peninsula is just they're not very cold tolerant. Gators are very cold tolerant. People see it in the news, the one in New York that they found that was chilling in a frozen lake. So they're able to go through a type of brumation, which is a reptilian version of hibernation. Crocodiles are not. Crocodiles want to keep moving where it's nice and warm. So you guys have seen crocodiles. Some of you have lived in Florida Keys for maybe a couple of years. How many do you think we have in Florida, in our Florida population?
3,000. More than enough.
More than enough, okay.
3,000.
3,000,
At least 2 or 3,000.
okay.
2,000.
2,000. All of you are around 2,000, a little bit over. Some of it's give and take because we fully don't understand the distribution between Bahamas, between Cuba, Jamaica, those kind of first chain islands that come into the archipelago that is the Florida Keys. We don't fully understand how much movement happens between those islands yet, but roughly around 2,000 individuals have been identified, not including the babies. Obviously, there's thousands of babies every summer. I've been there getting them from a nest and seeing a shark eat it 5 seconds later. So it's one of those things where, okay, we don't count those ones quite yet, but it is good. You guys clearly have seen
So
quite
when
a few.
when you pick up the nests, what happens? You protect them or what do you do?
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
Don't worry, we'll get there.
Okay. So.
So our research focus, we look at the environment. So we're trying to look at salinity as well as restoration efforts. There's a lot of stuff happening in the lower third of Florida. That's very interesting research, as well as we're going to go into a lot of nesting. We care a lot about what's happening with the babies, as well as what actually is available for mother crocodiles to use with their nests, and then go into growth and survival. When we're dealing with protected animals, when we're dealing with federally threatened protected animals, there's a lot of questions that the government wants to know, the county wants to know, the state wants to know. And it's good for us to make sure that we're able to find out so we can inform the people in charge. So the environment. These are ecological indicators. So these species, like I mentioned earlier, we can actually look at their health and start to understand if the environment's actually doing well. So species that are monitored like this are not just crocodiles. We use American alligators for them. In Alaska, they use wood bison in part of the Upper West Side. So these types of areas, when there's been a lot of disruption ecologically, so a lot of problems within the ecosystem, we're trying to get back to a point where it was healthier, where it was more natural, and some of the problems would just solve with the natural system. That's why we use animals like this. So specifically, this goes back to the Everglades. So roughly 100 or so years ago, we were in the then category for the Everglades. And all that water that came down was really good for Florida Bay. It helped a lot with getting more seagrass populations through, helping mangroves and building up some of those islands. The problem now, there's not nearly as much water, specifically fresh water, that comes down this way, and it's redirected it to other parts of the state that aren't great. So this has become the big push called Recover, backed by the Senate and all this stuff. It's billions of dollars trying to fix parts of the Everglades. Obviously, crocodiles aren't really living in the Everglades. It's not really their MO. However, they do actually need that fresh water. So that fresh water is important because even though they can handle the salt, not all of them, AKA babies, hatchling crocodiles, can. As well as most of the food they go after, not always going to be happy with the amount of salinity. So if we start to fix and have more of this water push, more of these natural original ecosystems are going to start to come back, which is very good for crocodilians. This ties in as well with American alligators, which is why I've done research on them for the last 40 years as well, because there are certain types of salinity zones. If you didn't know, there are certain changes from fresh water before you make it all the way into what is our typical salt or marine system. So this kind of dramatic scale here is where we're going to have a whole lot more of diversity in what is essentially brackish water. And in there is where really American crocodiles thrive. They can move through deep salt water, but that's not where they want to spend their life. And a lot of that's because of how much it changes their salt gland. So when we start to look at density and changes, we've actually been able to have a direct correlation with how salty the salt water is and ruining the density. So how many animals are there decreases as it gets saltier and saltier, because only certain size classes of those animals can actually survive. So throughout the whole Florida range, it's about 2.9 crocodiles per kilometer. But that includes, a 3-meter animal and a 0.5-meter animal. So it's a wide range there, but that we typically would like that higher, especially in parts of Florida Bay. A lot of out there, all those islands, there's not nearly as many crocs as there used to be, because a lot of that area has kind of became a dead zone. And not just for crocodiles, for a lot of species now. So salinity in crocodiles. Saltwater crocodiles, American crocodiles, they have those salt glands. So it's a gland located somewhere back here in their mouth that actually will allow them to get rid of that salt as it comes into the body. However, babies do not develop it for almost 2 weeks. So that's where that freshwater comes in, because the first 2 weeks, that baby really needs fresh water. And it can be, a very small puddle, but they need some access to it. So they're able to go somewhere and shake off salt water. However, obviously, areas of super, super high salinity, it's going to be a very big problem for their actually to move along further throughout their life, which is why brackish water and specifically getting below 40 salinity, 40 PSU for salinity is what we want. So the whole big push with Recover is trying to get more fresh water moving through the system naturally, which should help with just the overall health and livelihood for these species. So more water means more fish, better seagrass, better mangrove habitats. All of these things are going to come together and also mean more happier and fatter crocs. So for nesting, getting into the babies, getting into all the fun stuff. So you guys may see there, we wear kind of more funny clothes when we're out there. Mosquitoes, middle of Florida Bay, horrible, horrible. We will look as if we are covered in all the little mosquitoes. So we have these big fancy bug vests. They are not glamorous for photos, which is super fun. This is one of the better ones. We have some that it just looks like someone's been covered in black moss because of how horrible. And I guess it's also like Nucini. It's all those things out there. So what do you think we need? Now understanding the ecosystem and how it aligns with crocodiles, what do you think we need to build a croc nest?
Sand.
Very good. We do need sand. We need fresh water. We need that good substrate. So we need sand, dirt, or a light gravel. They can with a little bit of rock, but not tons. And then they need protection from tides and weather conditions. So obviously I'm from Fort Lauderdale. We just flooded out. And typically, besides, the horrible things that happen to people who live there, you wouldn't think too much about it when we go down to Florida Bay. But all that water has to push through. So actually, as we've started our nest checks this week, we've already started to see some nest attempts of mother crocodiles have already completely flooded because all that extra water comes through. And in some areas, there's not enough substrate. Some of this is younger mother crocs learning. They don't know everything immediately. They have to kind of learn through ways of trial and error. Some of it is, unfortunately, tides got too high in a place that typically wouldn't be this time of year because we're still supposed to be in the dry season. So here is where we have all of our known nests. So we know of over 3,000 nests that have popped up in the last 50 years. Now, a lot of these nest sites get reused. So mothers will come back and try to use the same area if it's been good to them time and time again. If you look there, we have how kind of we split all of them up. We do have some in the lower Keys and one in the middle Key. We actually just added one last year in Key West. So it's way out on a little tiny little island, but it was nice to see that there's a few more down there. But as you can see, from here, you would think crocs are everywhere, right? They've popped up, they're absolutely everywhere. Well, unfortunately, that's not true. Because a lot of these places, like Florida Bay, that used to be the stronghold. So when they started to put all these protections in the 70s, that's where all the crocs were. It's not where all of them are today. Those are actually the spots where we'll spend 8 hours in a boat in the middle of the night and maybe see 2 animals. Meanwhile, if you guys look here, those orange colors, that's Cape Sable. Do you guys know where Cape Sable is, roughly? So it's gonna be the backside of the Everglades, kind of moving towards 10,000 Island. So that area is now what we call the stronghold, specifically for American crocodiles. that is where probably 60% of individuals we know, at least during nesting and hatchling season, that's where they are. We will pull a lot more nests there. And throughout this timeline, you can kind of see where changes have happened. So when we remove or unplug certain really big canals over time, we usually can start to see more and more nests in those areas as it starts to restore that natural water quality, that chemistry. You start to see more and more of those animals come up. And a lot of this has been really, really good. But unfortunately, with North Florida Bay, you can see still this is the smallest it's been in 20 years, almost my entire life. Where we are at today, just absolutely just decimated with how the water quality is changing, which is kind of sad, but also a lot of it's interesting because we get to ask this question: how much of this was, human facilitated? How much of this is possibly a natural chemical system that's been happening, and we just haven't looked at it that way through geology yet? So this is when we kind of look at what we need for crocodiles. We like to put out cameras to see what the actual mother crocs do. It's pretty interesting to look at kind of a time lapse of how she builds her nest. But also in some areas, so Croc Lake, they had these big giant barges there in, I think it was early 2000s, and they just left all this substrate, all this dirt, and just sat there. And it ended up being the perfect thing that they needed for the crocodiles in that area. So in some places throughout other parts of South Florida now, they've actually started to move just leftover big giant piles of dirt in hopes that other crocodiles are able to actually use it. This would be same for sea turtles as well. When we have more substrate, it makes it a lot easier for them to build more of a mound rather than a ditch. So those are the two types of nests that they can do. Obviously, a mound's going to help a lot more for tides, so they're able to get them a little bit higher and away from some of those tides. And that's more in line with what we've seen has been successful. But obviously, when they're not successful, we get all those eggs. So we get all those that just drown, which is sad. But a lot of the times, this is very early on in the process, so they haven't really fully developed to that point. But once we have a baby, we want to, if you've ever seen a tail of a crocodile and it looks like it's missing some of those skew patterns, and you're like, oh, that's weird. That looks very surgical. That was us. So every crocodile that has been found in parts of Florida has an individual code along their skew, so along that tail pattern, that goes into a information system for us. We're up to over 1,700, but this is, again, a lot of babies over 50 years. You start to build up those numbers. So that's when we get the babies, and when we get any animals, we are measuring their head. So from tip of the nose to the back of the skull, we're measuring from the tip of the tail to right where their reproductive parts are, the cochlea. That's an SVL. So that's what we like to use. And it's used in a whole different types of reptiles, and even some amphibian species for kind of a truer measurement of size. And then we have, of course, tail length. So those are all the measurements that we want to collect because we're still learning more and more about these species. We're learning more about the sexual dimorphism. So that means differences between male and female. A lot of crocodilians, you especially can see it in alligators very visibly. You've seen a male alligator has a much longer jaw, more wider front jaw, and a lot of fat in its jowls. Females, they get fat in their jowls, and they'll still have a rounder jaw compared to crocodiles. But it's gonna be a little bit more dense. It's gonna be a little bit more that way because they don't care about growing as big, about 2 meters. They'll keep putting on weight, but at that point, they care a lot more about having babies, building less. So those are kind of things that we've started to realize, not just American crocodiles, but other species, how severe some of these changes are, which is why we like to look at growth and survival. So a lot of this has to do with body condition. Who here has been to the vet?
And what?
The vet?
Yeah.
Veterinarian office?
Obviously,
Yeah. Well, listen, not everyone has pets. You got it. So you've seen the chalk chart. So this is body condition. This is very basic, but this is how even in, pretty in wildlife, we still use some form of this. Ours is called Fulton, and it takes a statistical analysis to get that index number. But basically, it's the same thing. We're trying to see if the animal's healthy, if it's overweight, if it's emaciated. So those are all the things we kind of want to know about. And with American crocodiles, you can see sometimes they have really good body condition. So we don't see the bones. We don't see the great definition right behind their jaw. We see fat there. But individuals where we get poorer condition, we kind of can see they are a lot more skinny and lanky. And a lot of the times you don't know that until you pull it out. So we'll see the head and you won't really know until you get it onto the boat. And a lot of this has been tied with, unfortunately, looking at, again, salinity. I should have named this salinity versus crocodiles. It would have been more on theme. But for the body condition, so think of that chalk chart again, 2.14 is what we get. For healthy American crocodiles throughout their whole range, we want them about 2.27. So we're not bad. Considering where they are in their range, this isn't too bad. But the main problem is Biscayne, Crocodile Lake, and Northeast Florida, those were the original strongholds. So those were the areas where they were succeeding a lot more in the 70s and the 80s. And now they have the worst body condition across the whole thing. And a lot of that has to do with what we've discovered with the salinity, which is that it's not really good in those places. In those places, we're getting salinity that is over 40 PSU, so a lot more than we'd like. 30 is like pretty good normal salt water. If you walk into the ocean, that's typically what it should be. So we're adding even more salt, and really doesn't matter too much with size. Hypersalinity is always going to lesser the quality of life for those animals. So here in a normal state, a 1-year-old croc, if it were to have hypersalinity, only has about 13% of moving forward with its life, just because there's going to be less food, less places to hide, and it's just going to be a lot harder with that salt gland. Because even though they have one, it's kind of like us with drinking and livers. They work to a point. There is a stopping point for all biological functions. And we've kind of seen this trend over time with these animals, which very long living species, 60, 70, 80 years easy are possible, but it still is hindering them. So this is what we expect. This is what we should have in a normal atmosphere between, in year 1, a hatchling survival rate should be about 25%. Whereas what we just talked about, we're getting individuals that are over 5 years and having less than 25% of living to the next year because of salinity. Whereas here, they should make it to about 10 and nothing's taking them out besides, another crocodile. Not much is going to go after them at that size, especially in these habitats. Now, depending on how people feel about crocodiles, good news, population is growing. It's about 4%. Not great, but it's pretty good for a long living species. So this is kind of same for all predators. They are going to tend to grow the slowest and get back to whatever populations they needed. But truthfully, we probably wouldn't see them get more than about 3,000, just in terms of the space that exists for them here. But we would like, that general health. So that body condition, some of that stuff to improve. Not necessarily the population as much. But a lot of this goes back to juveniles. So that's why we look at all those babies. We collect them all summer. We will start doing that in a month, going all throughout the Keys, throughout Cape Sable, trying to find babies wherever they pop up. Which brings us to you guys. American Crocs in you. If you happen to see a nest, you'll know if you do. It's a nice mound, and there's probably a mother crocodile sitting around it or near it. Contact us. My contact information is at the end of this. But especially here in the Keys, we're very intrigued where more of them are popping up, mostly so we can monitor them and put in those little protections where we can for them.
Will the mother crocodile attack the person that's near their nest?
Well, you should walk towards it. We can,
Yeah.
because we don't care for our safety as much. We're more for the science than the living. But you can tell if you see a giant 10-foot animal digging into the sand. You wouldn't have to get that close. Be sure to not feed them. Remove any fishing items that happen to be around where you are leaving your fish. Put in a trash can. They're not gonna go dig through that. Don't approach a croc. See, we're getting there. Just smile and wave if you ever see one. And remember that they need our help. We are the fosterers for all the species here, not just crocodiles, but manatees, bonnet sharks. A lot of species down here are struggling with salinity. So this doesn't just impact American crocodiles. It impacts a whole slew of things that are down here. Luckily, there are billions of dollars currently trying to solve that problem, but a lot of this is going to take time. So in summary, this is one of the couples of American crocodiles. This is from Flamingo, kind of in the bridge of the Everglades region. So in summary, crocodiles, they're ecological indicators, which have allowed us to monitor the ecosystem, specifically when we're looking at salinity, as well as kind of our goal and hope of all these research and restoration projects, which I will say, we'll get to all of our partners in a second on the next slide. This is not just the University of Florida. There are many, many people who are part of these big initiatives. So we want to reduce salinity, and this should increase productivity in the environment, help with juveniles growing bigger and healthier, as well as hopefully improve survival rates and body condition for the species as a whole. Populations are bouncing back, so there's still much to do, but it's nice to see a lot of the efforts are working. So these are all of the partners that are a part of a lot of the American crocodile work we do here in Florida. Whole lot of people that have done great work for the 50 years it's been happening. So at this time, if you guys have questions or if you'd like to touch the skull, that is possible. But yeah, thank you guys so much. Right, yes, ma'am.
A couple of questions. What is the life expectancy of American crocodile?
Great question. So the life expectancy of American crocodiles is typically 70 to 80. It can be longer, obviously, but we tend to try to take the median.
And how long are they fertile?
Oh, they can be fertile very late into their life. So
Like we have a croc on our property, which you probably know about, and
probably yes.
yeah, she's I think about 40 now,
Yeah.
but she's digging, when she's, as she digs every year before would she be pregnant? I mean, would she
Probably,
be?
yeah, she's digging right now. She
So-
probably has already put eggs in the ground. They'll start to do that now to the end of May, and then sometime typically late June through mid-August is when all babies will come
So
out of
at
their
40,
nest.
she's still.
Yeah,
fertile.
oh, I mean, into her 70s and 80s, she could likely still be fertile.
Sort of like us.
Yeah, but they'll also take breaks. They'll also take breaks. So she may not always do this. If she has a couple of years of having, bad nests fall through or other, major hurricanes and stuff come in and change the environment, some of that stuff can be enough to shift them where they'll, just be a crocodile and function pretty normally for a year or two, and then kind of go back into that
Does
initiative.
she have to be impregnated? I mean, does she have to have,
Yeah, they would have done that in January.
there has to be a male around.
But here's the thing, they can swim pretty easily throughout all of this. So they may go very far away and have a male, or a male may come and seek them out if she really sticks just to this area. The male's not really going to stick around as much. He wants to go find other females.
So gestation is how long?
Typically for eggs, it's about 3 to 4 months gestation. Kind of depends. But around there is what it's going to be. Some of that has to do with age. Yes, sir.
Be sure to repeat the question.
I know. As soon as I made it to the third question, I was like, I only did it for the first.
Sorry, it's my fault.
No, you're good. Great question. Yes, sir.
What authority determines what is a reasonable amount before they become, they're no longer endangered?
A lot of that comes down to ICUN and then the Endangered Species Act. So all that's passed by
But who's in
Fish and
charge of
Wildlife.
monitoring how many there are? And at what point does the environment and the number of crocodiles reach a balance for a tipping point? In other words, you're not.
Yeah.
You're not saying how many.
So
we can
here,
have ultimately.
naturally, it should find that carrying capacity. So since no one's introducing crocodiles here. So here we're just helping the species bounce back. So when you're doing things like that, at a certain point, there will be enough animals that are here that protective measures aren't going to lift. A lot of it's the same things for like dolphins and stuff. There's a lot of protective measures for some of these animals just because they need it. But no one's introducing, so no one's adding to the population. It's just helping them get to a healthier level. But that carrying capacity is any animal, anything in any environment. It has a limit that it will reach to. And for these animals, they'll just go, to Jamaica. They can just leave. So if they don't want to be here anymore and they feel like maybe there's too many crocs in different areas, they can swim to the Bahamas. There's a whole lot of places for them to go to as our population grows.
You should repeat the question.
I know, I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I just had to.
I think you mentioned there are some spectacled caimans in the area.
Mhm.
Do
So,
you have an
so
idea?
not down here, to be clear, this is not in the Keys. So yeah, so spectacle caiman, they popped up. So for those online, spectacle caiman are a smaller cousin of alligators, typically getting to about 7 feet in length. They were kind of a pet-ish for
I
a
had
bit.
one.
You had one, okay.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see where this goes. In 70s, 60s, 80s, and a few of them got out specifically in Biscayne Bay and a little bit kind of in like the water conservation area, bridging Everglades. And to this day, very few in numbers that are left. We very seldomly find one, maybe 5 or 10 a year, very low numbers. But it is very interesting because, as I mentioned earlier, spectacle caimans live alongside American crocodiles throughout other parts of their range. So for them, they probably aren't too perturbed that they're here. But Florida as a whole is adding species like no one's business.
But they were from the pet trade.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, that's how everything's got here is
Yeah.
the pet trade. You can actually kind of look at what was popular 10 years ago and kind of use it as a I spy list for what to look for outside now, because that's when things start to come.
Well, he was mean. He never got tamed. He
Well,
was mean.
Habituation with crocodilians is very, very hard. Like they're one of the few animals still even in zoos where there's a lot of, that's what you see when they do like the tricks. They're standing out in like a fenced area typically for feedings and whatnot, because it is one of those animals that they can be pretty chill. I mean, I've spent way too many hours on top of them in the mud. But, some of that just comes with learning and understanding animals. We had a question over there. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering if you've, I know you were saying the salinity factor.
Mhm.
How about the other apex predators such as the Burmese python? Is that affecting their, rate of
Yeah.
population?
So Burmese pythons, their impacts for American crocodiles is pretty much unknown as of right now. Mostly because Burmese python can't really be in saltwater more than about 20 minutes.
It's kind of like what they said about the Burmese python can't make it to the Keys because of the saltwater. It's like they're in here now.
Oh, yeah, they can move parts of it. If they really follow different parts, like especially, this side of the Keys, there are some. But primarily a lot of how those ones came here is still through humans, but not on purpose. Like they have found Burmese pythons inside the hood of a car trying to stay warm. We track them using telemetry, so we're out in the swamps looking for Burmese python, and we'll be right on top of one in the muck, feeling around, and you don't feel it, you don't see it, because they will bury themselves under grass. They'll tie them, tie a little knot as much as they can because they don't want to be found. They're an ambush predator. They really don't want to. So far, there have not been any known attack from these species on each other, but obviously a very small subadult or juvenile crocodile is well within the size of being eaten by a Burmese python. A lot of vicious Burmese pythons are not likely to strike while swimming in open ocean. They're going to feel extremely uncomfortable there. Whereas in a deep swamp where, 6-foot alligator chilling on a ledge, that's a much better place for them to strike and still strangle and everything. It's a lot harder to constrict something in the open ocean. But likely in those more estuary areas, that is where we've thought it could happen, just hasn't actually been found yet. I do believe they did find a large croc eating a Burmese
That
python.
was my picture.
Huh? Oh, was your picture? Oh, yeah. So that's happened. The reverse has not happened yet. Yes, sir.
So Key Largo is home to the Crocodile National Wildlife Refuge, but is that still a great place for crocodiles?
Yeah, it's getting better. So Crocodile Lake National Wildlife, it is a good place for crocodiles. It's getting better. Those areas are going to kind of depend on the general health of substrate, water quality, but primarily it's getting better. It's not a bad place. They definitely have a good population. It's just very much the same individuals. There's not a whole lot of animals there. It's not growing, say. It's just pretty much staying as is. But some of that also has to do with just the fact that it's pretty small of an area compared to, the Cape Sable region is, miles and miles and miles and miles. So it's more just, it's a much smaller area, but primarily it's relatively well compared to, Florida Bay, compared to some of those other areas that are currently not doing great at all.
Okay, you talked about the python,
Mhm.
the alligators and crocodile.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, just say the python sees an alligator and or a crocodile, who would win?
Oh gosh. So
And
the
how big?
classic
How big
crocodile,
is-
alligator versus python.
The biggest.
Are they all equal size?
Yeah.
Were.
Okay.
Just say yeah.
Yeah, if they're all equal size, we'll say they're all 12 feet. They're all 12 feet. Python's losing. Between gator and crocodile, I'd probably like my odds with the gator, because that probably means it's a very large gator and it would have a lot more weight unless it's deep marine water. But honestly, if it's deep marine water, they're not fighting, they're just for different directions. Yes,
There's a
sir.
picture I saw recently, and I forget where my wife showed it to me. And it was a whole bunch of guys, I don't know, like a 23, 24 foot boat in the ocean. And they were snorkeling off a little something, whatever it was. And some of them took a picture of what they thought was a crocodile, I believe, out there. Now, I don't, what's the proximity? In other words, if you're there and they're there, are they going to be interested, or are they just going to keep moving?
So when you're out and about with crocodiles, primarily,
Well, let's say we're out and about and they're coming along. Let's not say. The whole ocean is not.
yeah,
for them.
they wouldn't be able to survive in like super deep ocean. They
No,
would eventually get
like,
tired. But yeah, like
it's like
right off the coast here. I mean, they're there. There's this specifically for Florida, because if we go into other parts of the world, it's a very different answer where crocodiles are a lot more dangerous than some of those ones because you're dealing with larger species, more aggressive species. American crocodiles as a whole up here in Florida, they're a lot more skittish. They really do not want to hang out or be near us nearly as much as some of us think. Just because, you see a large predator, it's hanging out. It's just one of those things. We all do it. It's a natural reaction. But a lot of the times they really aren't going to care that much about us. They're going to more than likely just move along, or just truthfully, if you come up and there's a boat and everything, more than likely, unless it's a mom protecting her nest, they're really just going to move on and not want to have anything to do with us. Like we try to go collect them, and they are the most painful thing of just, trying to get a photo up sometimes.
I do have a few questions over Zoom, if I could get some of these questions.
Okay.
So these are, I'm gonna pack two in one. One is, what is the farthest area tracked by one crocodile, and how far can one crocodile go in a day?
Oh, Lord. I'm not entirely sure how far a crocodile can go in a day. They likely could cover several miles, probably upwards of 20 to 30 in a day. But a lot of it would come down to size. It's a very big animal, you know, it really depends. And then what's the longest one's been tracked? They track quite a few more in Australia, so salties. I don't know specifically how long they've tracked, but they have several there that they have followed. And unless they mean tracked in terms of like individuals here in Florida that like we found as a baby and whatnot, we have several individuals that we've been tracking for 40 years. So we've found time and time again as they get bigger and able to kind of look at what that growth pattern has been for that animal.
Another question is the gender of a crocodile determined by temperature like it is with turtles, or is it a different method?
It's typically has to do a lot more with still climate, still with that warmth pattern. But some of that has to do kind of with, it's not as black and white with as turtles, because some of that has to do with the temperature and depth within the actual nest, which obviously these are much bigger animals than turtles. But it is kind of anyone knows about the problem of sea turtles is that climate change is causing there to be a lot more females, not as many males, depending on where some of these bigger nest sites are. So that is one of the other things that they've started to hypothesize, that in some regions, some crocodilians are going to start to bias one sex versus another, which then obviously they're very marine. We actually could have like a great distribution change, which would be very interesting to see how much of that changes throughout the Caribbean. Go back to you.
Yeah, we live with a couple crocodiles. We're on a hurricane harbor up here, and one big one, which she's named Big Mama,
Nice.
and a
Good
little
name.
guy, which is the little guy.
Yeah.
So anyway, the question was, and they're out here, you know, and they're pretty chill. They come by and eye you because they want to use the boat ramp. But manatees, we have a lot of manatees out there, and I've seen the manatees come up and actually swim into them. And manatees are pretty chill.
Yeah.
They're not aggressive, but the crocodiles, you know, run away. It's
So there hasn't ever been a known hunting of crocodiles on manatees. As I
The
mentioned,
question is, how do manatees and crocodiles interact? Is there predation going on?
no, so there's not a whole lot of predation. Manatees, we think of them as like the cute, bubbly, big thing, but like they can be extremely aggressive. People who like actually do research of manatees, like they have horrible bruises from being whacked with a manatee. So they have a lot more muscle and finesse as an animal than a lot of times we think, because we see round, like, oh, cute, lovable, which they still are. But no, they definitely will bully. Think of it kind of not the exact equivalent to a hippo, but kind of in that relation where like hippos will bully Nile crocodiles, even though Nile crocodiles can be a lot bigger. They can out-bully them. And you know, there's tons of species that out-bully crocodiles in different parts of the world. So that happens quite a bit, but typically not because of predation concerns, typically just they don't want them there.
I just got the impression that the manatees were not at all intimidated by these crocodiles.
Sometimes they, you know, it just comes down to maybe they want to go to a certain part. They have a baby with them. You know, mothers can be a lot more aggressive. Probably not, you know, like I said, hasn't been known predation of American crocodiles on manatees, but I'm sure if you see, you know, a large predator, you don't necessarily want them around your kid.
I have a good
Yes.
friend on Lower Matacumby
Okay.
on a canal. The guy across the canal would clean his fish, and he knew there was crocodile there that pull up on his boat ramp, and he would throw the carcasses in the canal. The manatee mama came there with a little newborn baby, and she witnessed the crocodile eating the baby.
Oh. Well,
Lower
it
Matacumby.
happens. When was that?
It was maybe 10 years ago.
Talk to scientists.
So the comment was this guest witnessed a baby manatee getting predated on by a crocodile.
My
So
friend,
her friend did.
You want to go back to
I
Zoom,
have
or-
one more question from Zoom. This person asks, where is the presenter, you? Where are you originally from and what influenced you to do this work?
Oh, I'm originally from Alabama and Texas. So way over where we don't have crocodiles. And I got influenced by two people, obviously Steve Irwin. Anyone around my age in wildlife got influenced by him. And then two, Dr. Sylvia Earle. When she started her big New Hope mission, I had just started college. I thought I wanted to be a nurse. I then realized I hated people. And I was like, oh, I can help animals. That sounds more fun.
Pick the good one.
Yes, yes, ma'am.
I have Steve Irwin still in the box. Remember when the dog came out right
Yes.
after?
I have like the board game. Like we go way back to like the 2000s. Like I have too much. My whole family. Yeah, no, huge influence. Yes, ma'am.
Question, we rarely have really cold fronts, but if well, I'm speaking from a personal standpoint, my little Cayman when I was a kid got
Yes.
frozen in
Yeah.
a block of ice. Because my mother would let me bring him in the house. I don't know why, but anyway, after he got frozen, I took him inside and I put him under warm running water and massaged him and he came back to life.
Mhm.
Just wondering how long. And the second time he got frozen, she convinced me he was dead and bury him. But anyway, how many times can a crocodile or an alligator
Mhm.
freeze? And how long can they be frozen and come back to life? Does anybody know that?
So the question was, can alligators and crocodiles freeze and come back? And how many times can that happen before it's not survivable?
So what you just described is brumation. So
What?
brumation. So that is the hibernation that some of them can go through. Now, crocodiles do not really have this known to them. So when we looked at that big map of all the animals, I can actually just so when we go back to
You did turn off screen share.
I did, we're going back. All right, so when we look at this, so your spectacle caiman, he's gonna be down here, the alligators. So caiman crocodilus, that's your spectacle caiman. And here we have the alligators. So they have that brumation ability. So they're gonna have a lot more fat in their body. And they're not going to be able, all reptiles and stuff do this. There are several species that go through brumation. But all reptiles have a slower metabolism. So when they're able to slow that down, they can slow that down even more during times of drought, during times of winter. So coming back to life, probably never coming back from being partially frozen through brumation. In some parts of North America, you can have alligators that can spend 60 days. So
60 days.
yeah, like a lot of the times it's not their entire body's frozen. It's just that they,
Wow,
The heart
Yeah.
is still bleeding or the mind is still working or something. Yeah, they're not really dead.
Yeah.
wow.
yeah, they just need the sun and the heat and all to come back, and then they'll start to kind of get back to normal functions. There are some amphibians that fully freeze themselves up and then come back.
But when he's buried, he'd be dead, right?
Yes, likely he, yeah.
Spotted.
All right. We're gonna do that. I'll stick around after for people who have questions.
So Paul, we wanted to thank you so much for being our April speaker. I hope we all learned about our neighbors in the backyard. If you are interested in donating or becoming a member, feel free to talk to our front desk here. And be sure to join us on May 20th when we open Aquanauts to Astronauts. I'm very excited about that new exhibit. And if anyone watching from home or anyone even in this room has any questions for Paul that they weren't able to ask today, or if you want to share his presentation with someone else, this will be going up on YouTube. So feel free to rewatch it and ask him any remaining questions here. And as a thank you for being our speaker, we would like to give you a 1-year membership.
Oh my God, thank you guys. Very sweet.
Thank you. Feel free to stick around and ask him any questions.
Do you want me to end it on my